Before I get into this exciting masterclass, please allow me to take this opportunity to really share my appreciation for Times of India and this entire author franchise. I've been reading about it for the longest time, and because I'm not a her, I've not been able to participate in this. But I'm so happy that we have finally got a forum where I can participate here, where I can interact with everybody associated to this franchise, and a huge amount of credit and applause to Times of India, because today in today's day and age, when the entire books and authors ecosystem is facing this tremendous onslaught from digital content, it's really important to keep investing into this ecosystem, and I think Times of India is taking the lead. So my huge congratulations to the author franchise, and thank you so very much for inviting me. And it's my privilege to be with you all today. Okay, let's get cracking on this. And it's a delight and a pleasure to be with you all. I'm assuming that some of the viewers are already authors who are part of the fraternity. Some of you are aspiring authors who are looking to start your writing. Some of you are probably just readers who love books and who love storytelling and are participating here with us. So a huge welcome to all of you. And I think, like I said, let's quickly get cracking on this masterclass. Before that, let me just introduce you to myself. So by way of acquaintance, my name is Vineet Bajpai. I am an entrepreneur and an author. An entrepreneur in the sense that I run one of the larger advertising agencies in this country. It's called the Magnon Group. We are about 500 people. We are proud part of the Fortune 200 Omnicom network, and Magnon is one of the market leading agency groups in this country. I'm also the founder of Talent Track, which is India's first content marketplace, which is a tech platform aggregating all kinds of creators, producers, agencies, and brands in this digital content economy. So it's an automated platform. But I'm not here to talk about my entrepreneurial life. I think I'll put that aside for a while and speak to you about books and stories and my life as an author. So I'm delighted to share with you that I have written 9 books, and 5 of them have been national bestsellers. My trilogy, the Harappa trilogy, has sold more than 5 lakh copies, in various states and various languages. With deepest humility, I share with you that it is considered to be one of the biggest success stories in modern day fiction writing in India. Taking this opportunity, I will show you this book. I'm hoping that most of you have read it. Like I said, we've sold 5 lakh copies, so it's probably reached 5 lakh households. But if you haven't, I'd be delighted if you pick up a copy. So my writing career started back in 2004. Yes, I was very young when I wrote my first book called Build from Scratch. My first 3 titles were business and self-help books. My first book was called Build from Scratch, which was released in 2005. My second book was called The Street to the Highway, again, a national bestseller. It was released in 2011. My third business book was titled The 30-something CEO, which was released in 2015. So I started my journey as an author writing business books. But after I wrote 3 business books, the world of fiction invited me and summoned me, beckoned to me, and I started writing fiction novels. Harappa was my first novel, which finally was a trilogy. The first novel of the trilogy is called Harappa, Curse of the Blood River. The second is called Pralay, and the third is called Kashi. So this trilogy did really well. It got a lot of love from readers. It has now been acquired by one of the largest film production houses in India for a screen adaptation. So I'm hoping that you will be able to see Harappa trilogy on the big screen, like 2 big films like Bahubali 1 and 2, in the next, hopefully in the next couple of years. After the Harappa trilogy, I wrote another trilogy called the Delhi trilogy, which was a historical thriller written in the backdrop of the revolt of 1857. This is the first book, Mastan, the Fallen Patriot of Delhi. This is the first title of the Delhi trilogy. The second title is called 1857, and the third title is called Delhi. So we've sold about 25, 30,000 copies of this trilogy. Also, it's well on its way to becoming a national bestseller. So I think enough about me. I just thought I should tell you everything so that we know we are part of the same fraternity and what little experience I'm able to bring to the table. And without much ado, I will now start with the masterclass. Okay, so the first question that I've been asked is that what is the one critical success factor for for an author to write. So to write a successful novel. So I think there are many critical success factors, and no better platform than the author franchise to talk about it, and Times of India and JK Paper, for these wonderful organizations and companies to support this. So I'll quickly get to the answer, which is the one critical success factor to write a winning book. Now, it's really hard to say if there's really one factor, because I wish. I wish it is there was any one simple answer. But if I'm compelled to say what is the one critical success factor, so I would say that write about things that you deeply care for, that you deeply love, and that you're deeply knowledgeable about. You will see that all the books, all the fiction novels that have done well have have a the affection of the author for that topic, the the joy that the author has felt while writing that book really comes out in the pages, really comes out in the words. It's very difficult to write something successful, something winning, something which is going to win hearts and minds if you yourself are not passionate about that topic. So to give you an example, when I started writing the Harappa trilogy, why did I think of Harappa? In fact, when I told my friends that I'm writing a book titled Harappa, they were really surprised. And one of them asked me, "What are you going to write about Harappa? I mean, who knows anything about Harappa? Who even remembers?" But the fact is that when I was in school, and I'm sure as as all of us, when we started studying history as a subject in class sixth, we really I remember the first topic used to be the Indus Valley civilization, and it was very intriguing to me even as a child. I remember when I was in class sixth and reading this NCRT book, and it would talk about the Indus Valley civilization and how it was a civilization almost ahead of its time. It was no less than the Egyptian civilization in some factors, in some manners. It was actually ahead of that civilization. How they were master town planners, how they had the knowledge of of brick kilns, of building, of town planning, of sanitation, metallurgy, and all of that. And then that topic would end saying that the Indus Valley civilization vanished mysteriously, or the famous Aryan invasion theory, that there were Aryans who came and who invaded the Indus Valley and threw out more than 1 million people from their homes and conquered northern India. So more about that later. But it was hard for me to accept that there was such an advanced civilization at its peak. From what I've read, at its peak it had more than 1 million inhabitants, and how can such a civilization just vanish and have no reason? Why I'm telling you all of this is because it compelled me to not only research the topic, it also made me very passionate, very inquisitive about the topic, and I did a lot of reading. And I must share with you that the discoveries I made were mind blowing. How was the Indus Valley civilization connected to Mesopotamia? How was it connected to Sumeria? What kind of trade routes did it have? Did the Aryans really come, or was it, just a Western historians propounded, championed theory? If you notice, it's still called a theory. It's still called the Aryan invasion theory. It's not a proven fact. And when I read more about this, I really wanted to know, so what happened? Did really white skinned, golden haired, blue eyed riders, with their thousands or tens of thousands of horses, gallop through the Khyber and sweep through the entire Indus Valley civilization? Did they really conquer? Did they really throw out the indigenous population? How much truth is in that theory? And it is this mystery: did the Aryans really come, or is there a much larger objective, a much larger conspiracy, around this theory? What is the reality, and what really happened in the Indus Valley civilization? So this is, something that I wrote about in Harappa. And I think the reason why the Harappa trilogy became such a success was because I was very deeply passionate about this topic. I spent a lot of time. I'm not a historian, so I never stake claim to the correctness of every fact, everything that is mentioned in the book. While I try my best, I research as deeply as I can, but I'm not a historian, I'm a storyteller. But so in that sense, I did a lot of research, and I found that there were threads connecting Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Lothal, threads connecting the Gangetic Plain. Um, there was no evidence of an invasion. When you really read, what will happen in an invasion, Harappa, cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro had big cities. They were big cities, big walls. If an invasion happened, there should have been a siege. The cities should have been surrounded for months, maybe if not years. There should have been excavations, should have shown weapons, they should have shown skeletons, they should have shown destruction. But none of that has been found in any excavation, apart from, I think, a few bronze arrows. Nothing has been found which talks about a violent struggle. So if there was no violent struggle, if there was no destruction, how did an invasion really happen? And on what basis did Western historians and some Indian historians also, I will not get into the whole politics of it, but why was the Aryan invasion theory propounded? Why is it that some people call the Indus Valley civilization the Saraswati civilization or the Saraswati Sabhyata? The Mahakumbh is going on, and we are seeing unprecedented enthusiasm around the Mahakumbh. But if you look at it, where does it all start? The Prayag is supposed to be the Triveni Sangam, and everybody sees the Ganga and the Yamuna and the darkish water and the greenish water, coming together. But where is the Saraswati? So our scriptures say that there was another mighty river called the Saraswati. Some of the Puranas, they introduce, so and so Rishi Saraswati ke tat par tapasya kar rahe the. So, which means that a river called Saraswati actually existed. And do you know there is a link between the Indus Valley civilization and the Saraswati Sabhyata? Do you know that there is something called, the Great Flood, which is in every religion? Christianity talks about it with Noah's Ark. Islam talks about it. Judaism talks about it. There's a great flood. And Hinduism talks about it, in the name of Pralay, which is the second part of the Harappa trilogy. It's called Pralay, the Great Deluge. So there is also a theory that there was a huge flood. The Indus Valley, shifted its course, and maybe that was the reason why the Harappa civilization, became what it became. So there's lots of mystery, lots of intrigue, lots of conspiracy. And you will find all of that in the Harappa trilogy. Why I'm telling you all of this is because when you read the book, you will see that there are two timelines in the trilogy, and one is about the Harappan civilization. The other is about modern day Varanasi. It's about modern day Kashi, the constituency of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. My book, the third title of the Harappa trilogy, is called Kashi, Secret of the Black Temple. There are two timelines in this. One is a modern timeline, which unfolds primarily in the city of Kashi, in the temples of Kashi, on the ghats of Kashi, with the Mahants, with the sadhus, with the tantrics of Kashi, with modern day crime, modern day religious strife, a larger conspiracy. And how is that entire story connected to the Indus Valley civilization? So it's been loved by readers, and I'm sure you will love it too. But you have to be very passionate about what you write, because every line, every word, and every piece of fact and information that you produce, on a piece of paper, is going to reflect that passion. And it's not just about me. If you see, some of the other people, some of the other authors, who write, you will see their passion. So, one leading author, I don't know if I'm permitted to take names, so I will avoid taking names, but a leading author who's written, on Lord Shiva and Lord Rama, I've seen whenever he's in an interview, he's such an ardent follower of Lord Shiva. He seeks blessings of Lord Shiva, in every interview, and you can make out that it's his love for Shiva which probably compelled him to write the beautiful books that he's written, and those books have become supremely successful. So any kind of fiction, whether it is horror, whether it is mystery, whether it is just a modern day story, whether it is young adults, whether it is romance, whether it is history, mythology, just make sure, if you're asked to write a book, or if you are excited about writing a book, make sure you write about something which you are really knowledgeable about, where you are very passionate about, where you have hold a lot of interest. Because how can you hope to win the interest, or captivate the attention of tens of thousands of readers, if you yourself are not captivated by that topic? So I think that's very, very important. And like I said, if you see the cover of Harappa, you can see a stormy night, you can see a flood, you can see at the bottom the ghats of Kashi, you can see an ancient temple. It's all, even the cover reflects how much you feel, for the book that you write. Similarly, when I wrote the Delhi trilogy, one of the things that I realized was that there was not much literature on the revolt of 1857. Now, who knows? Was it a revolt? If you read historians, you realize that it was not really a revolt. It was basically India's first war of independence. But when we see about the national movement, as it is called, the 20th century national movement, there is so much literature about it. There is so many movies about it. There are so many books about it. We know all the characters. We know, when I say characters, I say it very respectfully. The people who fought for our independence, whether it is from the entire Congress side, everybody from Mahatma Gandhi to Jawaharlal Nehru, like we know all of them, whether it was Sardar Patel, whether it was Maulana Azad. We also know the revolutionary, the Hindustan Socialist Republican Army. We know about Ram Prasad Bismilji. We know about Bhagat Singh, the great Bhagat Singh. We know about Chandrasekhar Azad. We know about Sukhdev. We know about so many freedom fighters, and well deservedly so. But when you ask about 1857, which was where there was a lot more bloodshed, where the entire North India was involved in fighting off foreign yoke, how much do we really know about the revolt of 1857, barring the little bit that we've read in our history books, and probably one movie, Amir Khan's movie Mangal Pandey. I believe it did not do very well, though I really, really enjoyed it. But what do we know? If you ask somebody, walking on the street today, or just enter a classroom and ask them who were the heroes of 1857, I don't think that, other than Rani Lakshmi Bai and Mangal Pandey himself, very few people will know names of the heroes of 1857. The real story of 1857. What happened in Delhi? What was the siege of 1857 like? How many tens of thousands of people laid their lives? Maybe some people will know Babu Kunwar Singh, maybe some people will know Tantia Tope, but that's about it. Thousands of people, tens of thousands of fighters, warriors of this country laid their lives. There was the bloodiest siege of Delhi in the history of Delhi, a fighting that raged on for months together, and which forever changed the course of India's history. There was, there aren't very many books, there aren't very many fiction novels, there aren't very many movies, there isn't a web series. And which is where I felt it was great injustice to that historical moment. And once again, it also had my love for the city of Delhi. I've now spent more than 4 decades, in Delhi. It's the city where I went to school, went to college, did my MBA, started my companies, and where I live. I have deep amount of love for Delhi. I read, City of Jinns by William Dalrymple when I was much younger. Then I read Delhi, a novel by Khushwant Singh, which was again, a beautiful, beautiful book. And I had decided at that time that one day I will write a book on Delhi. And this is how the Delhi trilogy came into being. I urge you all to read it. And in that trilogy, you will find two great things. One, my deep, deep orientation towards patriotism and nationalism. I shouldn't say nationalism, it's become a very controversial word nowadays. But my deep, deep love for my great nation. huge amount of respect for the people who led the war of 1857, the first war of India's independence, and my deep love for the city of Delhi, for the life of Delhi, for the poets of Delhi, for the cuisine of Delhi, for the clothing of Delhi, for the culture, the heritage, the shairi, all of that. And all of that came together. The first book is called Mastan, the Fallen Patriot of Delhi. So it's a violent story. It's also got a bit of a love and romantic angle, but it's a violent story of a man's struggle between his personal desires and his duty to his nation, all set in the backdrop of Delhi, the walled city, the crumbling Mughal Empire in 1857, and with great characters like Mirza Ghalib, Bahadur Shah Zafar, lots of characters from the British side, who are lesser known, but who played a great role, a key role, in that episode of history. So it's a beautiful fiction novel with, once again, a huge amount of information, a huge amount of knowledge about the revolt of 1857 and the city of Delhi. So I urge you that I can only use my own example and the example of people who have written. I just mentioned the great Khushwant Singh, the late Khushwant Singh ji. And when you read his book, you realize that in his own beautiful, unparalleled style, he has written about Delhi, but you can also sense his deep love for the city. So anybody who succeeds, whether they write mythology, history, or any kind of book, I think deep knowledge about that subject, deep interest in that subject, deep love for that topic is the one critical success factor that I would recommend. Yeah, it's a very good question. And this is a question that I'm asked at various places. I think when I spoke a few times at the Jaipur Literature Festival, I was asked the same question, and various other literature festivals, various other forums. And I think that this question emanates from the fact that while we have a lot of fiction authors today in India, there are only a handful who are writing about mythology and history. But let me qualify that statement. When I say there are a handful, when you really look at it quantitatively, I will not say there's a handful. There are lots of authors who are coming up with work. Some are very, very good, and I have a huge amount of respect for them. Some, I would say, are starting out, and I have a lot of respect for everybody. Anybody who's able to write a book, deserves a lot of respect, and I treat them as part of my author community. So a huge amount of respect for each one of them, a huge amount of admiration. But I think what is also important to understand is that the kind of history and mythology thrillers that are being written, they are interpretations and reinterpretations of existing characters in our history or in our mythology. So you will see people who are writing over and over again about Lord Shiva, writing over and over again about Lord Ram. There are books on Durga Mata. There are books on every possible character now. I've myself seen 2 or 3 books on Karn. I've seen 3 or 4 books on Draupadi. There are so. What I'm basically trying to say is that while it is beautiful that people are trying to interpret and reinterpret, and I think it's a great thing that Sanatan Dharma offers, to its followers or even observers, is the freedom to be able to really form, a unique relationship with God, a unique relationship with the scriptures, and really treat them the way your heart desires. I think it's this glowing freedom, which sets this world apart. But the point is that when you look at it purely from the merit of what kind of literature is being created, I feel over and over interpreting the same characters can become, after a while, a little labored, because I feel that what readers deserve are new characters as well, new stories. They deserve exciting plots. They deserve exciting new worlds and fantasies. Yes, you can have mythology and history as a backdrop, but basically beating the same characters to death over and over again, in my opinion, is not the best format of writing. So first of all, in terms of writing history and mythology, to answer your question, how is it different, is that you need to be very clear about who you want to write about, what you want to write about, and why you want to write about it. Like I explained in the Harappa, in my own example of the Harappa trilogy, in the example of the Delhi trilogy, in both these, you will see that there is a lot of mythology in the Harappa trilogy. I don't want to reveal too much, but you will see the Matsya avatar of Lord Vishnu, but in a humanized way. And people have loved it. Readers have loved it. They've loved the interpretation of the Matsya avatar that I have been able to do. I've been blessed to do in the Harappa trilogy. But it's not about the Matsya avatar. The book is not about Lord Vishnu or any of his avatars. There is a mention of characters of or I would say gods and devtas and demigods like Sheshnag in the book, but it's not about Vishnu. It is a very different story. It's a story of a modern day entrepreneur called Vidyut, who's based in Delhi, who belongs to a bloodline which is a mystical bloodline connected to the Indus Valley civilization, and an entirely new plot which connects it to the church, which connects it to modern day capitalism and all of that. So which is what makes the whole story intriguing. So while you pepper it with mythology and history, but you are writing absolutely new and different stories, and I think that really embraces the interest of the reader, because they are getting to really feel the pleasure of reading about characters and mythology and historical characters that they are familiar with, but they are also reading an entirely new plot. And I would, I don't want to talk about myself too much, so I would use another example, which is let's take the Da Vinci Code, written by Dan Brown, and you will see that there is the entire story is about a modern day symbolism, or he's a professor of symbolism in some big university, if that really is a thing. But Robert Langdon is the character. And if you see the Da Vinci Code, there is Leonardo da Vinci in that mentioned in that book or connected to that book, but it's not a story about Da Vinci. There is also a bloodline. There is Mary Magdalene. There is the Holy Grail. There is even the mention of Christ, but it's not the story of the Holy Grail or Christ. It is a modern day story in the backdrop of the Priory of Sion and the Illuminati and various other things. So I think that is very, very important when we are looking at historical and mythological writing, and how it's different from any other form of writing is because you are starting with a reference point. You are starting with a huge responsibility. You are talking about scriptures which are very close to people's hearts. You're talking about characters. When you write about Lord Krishna, it's devotion on paper. When I wrote about Krishna, it was devotion on paper. It's a huge responsibility. Even when we write about historical characters, so when you write about the last Mughal king, Bahadur Shah Zafar, you have to be very well researched to understand what is it that you're talking about. So in modern day writing, I think that, or in non-historical or mythological writing, I think that responsibility is lesser. But there is another challenge in that, and that challenge is, how do you make it very interesting? Because there is an advantage, and if I may confess so myself, being a writer of mythological and historical thrillers, you have a great reference point, you have a great starting point, a great launch pad, a springboard into a story. When you're writing a totally disconnected story, which is everything is fiction and everything starts from scratch, you have to create an entire world from scratch. So I think that responsibility becomes very big, and which is why you will see it's very, very hard. 1 out of 100 authors is really able to find success, because it's very hard to be able to really win the interest when you're doing modern day storytelling. I will not take the name of the author I'm talking about, because he's a very good friend of mine. I have great admiration for him, but he also writes historical thrillers. He's a friend of mine, and I think we have a lot of mutual admiration. When I read his books, he is a master storyteller. A master storyteller when it comes to the historical aspect of things. The way he recreates history is beautiful, and I pick up his books only to read that part. But when he switches to the modern side of the story, he is very bad. Even if I say this with deepest respect, and purely as somebody who loves his work, but I totally dislike the modern day storytelling that he does, which means this should reflect that these two are very different skill sets. being able to write something in the historical perspective and recreate and create a magical world is one thing. To start in a modern day world, in the hustle and bustle of metropolitan cities like Bombay and Delhi, and to try and create a mystical world here, to try and create something which people connect with, identify with, have an emotional bond with, is very, very difficult. And yeah, so I think this is really the the primary difference in modern day stories, and which is why you will see it's almost unfortunate that almost every thriller, modern day thriller that I read, when I read the blurb of the book, it's always the same thing: a psychological killer on the loose, a gruesome murder has happened, police is on the trail, and that the psychological thriller is going to murderer is going to commit more murders unless he or she is caught in time. So this is really become such a standard storyline, because in the modern day world there are lesser notes that you can play around with. You have to be able to craft stories out of things that people are experiencing every day, so there is very little room for fantasy. So which is why they will describe a very gruesome murder, they will try to connect it with some ritual or from with some planetary movement and all of that, but it's a very, very limited landscape, and there is very deep talent that is required to be able to create that. I was speaking to somebody else, somebody the other day, when we were talking about books and cinema, and I said that the only person who could actually create magic in modern day stories, despite being in his 60s, was Yash Chopra. And not just as a filmmaker. If you take a movie like Dil To Pagal Hai, he actually wrote that story, as far as I know, if I'm correct. And it is amazing to see how somebody in his 60s can write a love story about people who are in their 20s and still make it so relevant and still have such a close connect, with what is happening in today's world. So if today there's a 35-year-old author or a 45-year-old author, can they really write romance, college romance? Can they really write young adults work? So I think it's very, very difficult. So both streams, historical and mythological thrillers on one side and modern day fiction writing on the other, they're very different kind of skill sets. And I would say that the one side requires a lot of love, passion, research. The other side requires a lot of connect with the modern world, with what millennials, what Gen X, what they are thinking, how they are operating. One needs to have a very close touch on that fabric. So these, I would say, this is the primary difference between the two. Again, a very a very frequently asked question. I get a lot of DMs on Instagram and on Facebook of smart young aspiring authors asking me how they should start. And I think my simple answer to them would be, I think what Mark Twain once said: if you want to begin, begin. So the surest way to put pen to paper, the surest way to start writing, is to start. And I must share my own example with you, that I was, like I said, I was a business an author of business books. And and my books were doing really well. They're still being sold in a big way. All books sold more than 15-20,000 copies in their time. And despite that, I got into fiction writing. And if I tell you how I started writing my business books and how I started writing my fiction novels, I think it might answer your question. So when I started writing my business books, I told you, it was, I was very, very young when I started writing. I think to be an author, of course, we have authors who are 16 and 17 and 18 and very young. But to write a business book, I think I was 24 when I started writing it. So this was way back in in the year 2005, and of course the whole startup ecosystem has become very, very vibrant nowadays. And you have TV shows, and you have so many events and so many books and everything. But that was not the case 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, I wrote this book, for startups. And uh, the way I started writing was, I simply wanted to share the knowledge of how to get a company going from scratch. For an Indian entrepreneur who's not from Silicon Valley, who's not from Stanford or Harvard, who doesn't have a business background, hailing from a middle class family, how does an entrepreneur start a business here in India? And because we had seen some early success, I wanted to share it with aspiring entrepreneurs like me. And I basically started out with writing. I thought I'll write a white paper. I'll write an essay, and probably get it published in one of the newspapers. And so it was as simple an endeavor as that. And I started writing it, of course, with a deep sense of purpose. And when I started writing it, I realized just the preface took me 7 pages. And that's when I felt that, what I want to share is a lot, and I think it should be given the shape of a book. That's how I started writing my first business book. So there was no grand plan. What I'm trying to share with you is there was no grand plan. There was no writing course that I did. I didn't go to any literature school in America to learn how to write a book. I did not wait for that moment of inspiration. It was just something that I wanted to tell the world. I felt I have a knowledge to share or a story to tell, and I just started writing. And then one page led to the other, and I'm sure the same will happen with you. The same happened with Harappa when I basically read the book of a Western author, and I said, and I felt that why is it that we are not creating this magic here in India? Why is it that there's not more work being done about Indian scriptures? And again, remember, this was 2016, 2017 when Harappa was released. Since then to now, of course, there's been a lot of work on mythological books, but at that time there was just one or two authors who were writing about Indian mythology and Indian history. And which is why probably when Harappa came, it was a big hit. But when I started writing it, very simply, I just felt that I wanted to write something about the Indus Valley civilization, the Saraswati Sabhyata. I wanted to write about the city of Kashi. Once again, my grandparents are from Kashi, so remember my first point where I said you have to be passionate about what you write. So I love that city and I wanted to write about it, and I just started writing. And I surprised myself. By the time I had written 10, 15 pages, the plot was clearer in my mind. I knew what I wanted to, the world that I wanted to create, both in the past, in the Indus Valley civilization, and in modern day times. And then one chapter led to the other. So my suggestion to you will also be that, it's uh, just jump in, just start writing. If and don't try to be the best version of your writing self in the first cut. So there's always self editing. When you write a book, you write the manuscript yourself first, and before you send it to your editor, is an opportunity that you get, which is called self editing, and which is where I feel I am able to raise the standard of my books by about 30-40% when I'm doing self editing. It's a very hard process, let me tell you, to read every word, every line, and then to stop at every line and think about how to make it better. It's a hard process, but it's a priceless process. So my suggestion to you will be, you have a laptop, you have a table, you have a cup of coffee, you have a window with some sunlight, just sit down, just start writing, and you will amaze yourself. You will be delighted with the outcome. And even if you're not, even if you write your first 4 pages, 5 pages, 10 pages, and you feel you're not happy with it, don't worry about it. Keep writing, keep writing, finish your book. I think this world would have found hundreds of more fantastic and unforgettable authors if people learned to finish their books. I think there is so much talent out there, so much literary talent, people with so many stories to tell. They start writing books, but they are not able to keep the discipline of actually completing those 60,000, 70,000 words. And you will complete those 60, 70,000 only when you start writing. So set small targets for a day. Say you'll write 100 words, say you'll write 200 words. I assure you, when you set out to write 200 words, you will end up writing 400 or 800, and that's really going to be the fuel that's going to charge you, for the further writing of your book. And my best wishes for that. Okay, so once again, I think this one piece of advice is very hard to give because I think the making of a successful book takes a lot of things, a lot of uh, inputs. So, if with your permission, if I can quickly share two advice that I would want to share with my fellow, my fraternity. The first is, be very focused on the language that you use, especially if you're a fiction writer. And I'm assuming that most of the viewers here, most of the people listening to this telecast, they're all most of them are fiction writers or readers. I think the language really makes a big difference. When I say language, I mean Of course, depending on the topic that you're writing, if you're writing literary fiction, you'll use a different kind of language. When you're writing a thriller fiction novel or a murder mystery, it's different. Romance is different. But whatever language you use should be, in its own domain, poetic to some extent, right? And if you uh, for a very rudimentary example, for something that just comes to my mind as we speak, is suppose you're writing that I felt really angry, or she felt really angry. A character in your book, yes, she felt very angry is fine. But what if you write, she felt the molten lava of hate emanating from the depths of her heart, right? It's just like I said, it's a jiffy of an example, so don't take it literally. But what I'm trying to say is that the same thing can be said in a more beautiful way, in a way that conveys a deeper layer of emotion or a vivid world around the writing. One of the things that I must share with you, and you can, the Harappa trilogy has more than 20,000 reviews online, and you can go and read them. And the one thing that a lot of leading publications, newspapers, television channels, when they reviewed the Harappa trilogy, all of them said one common thing, which was that it sounds like reads like a screenplay. You actually create a world while you're reading. So if there is, a devta who is half human, half god, and he's combating 20 adversaries on a stormy night next to a blue magical flame, when you create a world like that, the reader should feel that they are in that moment, feeling everything around them. So I think language that you use, very small twists, can be beautiful. I'll share an example with you, once again a cinematic example of a very famous movie, Muzaffar Ali Sahab's Umrao Jan, in which the great Rekha ji, did a fantastic role. And in that, they show she's in Lucknow and she goes to a Lucknowi Shire, and she's also attempting to write some shairi. And she goes to this, really expert shair, like a very profound shair. And she goes to him and she says, कि मैंने एक शायरी लिखी है, एक शेर लिखा है, अगर आप सुन लेंगे तो, और आप कैसा लगता है, अगर आप मुझे गाइड करेंगे तो बहुत मदद होगी. एंड ही सेज, या प्लीज गो अहेड. एंड शी सेज, दिल ही नहीं आप मेरी जान लीजिए, बस एक बार मेरा कहा मान लीजिए. एंड दे शो ब्यूटिफुली दैट शायर सेज कि ख्याल तुम्हारा बहुत अच्छा है, लेकिन ये मत लिखो दिल ही नहीं आप मेरी जान लीजिए, तुम लिखो दिल चीज क्या है आप मेरी जान लीजिए, बस एक बार मेरा कहा मान लीजिए. So in that movie, they've beautifully shown that it's not just the intent and the thought, but the small finesse of the kind of writing and the language that you use that can make your writing immortal and stand out from the others. So that would be one. And the second advice, very, very quickly, because I insisted on sharing two, is something that most authors fail to do, or are have some resistance towards, is and something that I've written in, I've said in a few of my interviews, which is that you really have to be the enterprise around your book. A book will not sell itself. All the big success stories that you see around yourself in India or overseas, authors have really gone out there and have invested time, effort, resources. They've traveled around, they've invested money, they've done everything, and which is when a book becomes a success. And a platform like this one, the Times of India and JK Paper author franchise, I think it's platforms like these which play a key role in promoting books and authors. But every author, after the completion of the book, should also earmark time, earmark energy, earmark some resources if possible, to make your book a success. And why not learn from the movies? Even big authors like big actors like Shah Rukh Khan and Salman Khan, when their movies are coming out, does Shah Rukh Khan need any introduction? Does Salman Khan need any introduction? But you will see that they spend weeks and months traveling the length and breadth of this country to promote the movie that is coming out. And that should tell us the importance of marketing, in the world of any kind of content creation, books being one of them. And especially now, like I said, that the whole books ecosystem is facing such an onslaught from digital content, and it's very hard to draw away a millennial or a Gen X. Gen X is, I think, still into books, but millennials and Gen Zs, And I'm sure they will also embrace books back once the whole digital thing starts to become overwhelming, because what books offer nothing else does. But in this world where every author, every book has to scream out for attention, has to stand out. Somebody told me there are about 100,000 titles that are released in India alone every year. How will your book stand out amongst 100,000 titles, 100,000 talented authors, 100,000 books being released by publishers? So if you're writing just for, like when Ramcharitmanas starts, I think Goswami Tulsidas says Swanta Sukhaye, which means I write for myself, for my own pleasure. And if that is the intent with which you want to write, then of course this point really doesn't hold much water for you. But if you want to become a successful author, you want your book to be a big hit, then don't stop at the writing. Get into marketing of your book as enthusiastically as you did the writing. It's a very insightful question. It's a very insightful question. In fact, this question lies at the very heart of my own endeavors of writing about mythology and history. And if you notice, in one of the previous answers, I said that I'm using the backdrop of mythology and history, but creating absolutely new characters and stories which are as gripping as any really fast-paced novel. And the reason is precisely, what you have asked in this question, which is how do I engage, young readers, uh, millennials and Gen Zers, and very soon Gen Alphas, who are not the Ramayana and Mahabharata generation. What I mean by that is, when you look at Gen X, we all grew up with Ramayana being watched every day, on television, every weekend on television. Mahabharat being watched every weekend on television. Uh, I remember, and you'll read in several books how India used to go almost into a curfew when Ramayana and Mahabharat used to be coming on television. Everybody, and I think that's the beauty and diversity of this wonderful great nation, is that crossing all faith lines. I think Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jews, everybody was watching Ramayana and Mahabharata. And which is why, I say I think we are the Ramanand Sagar and B.R. Chopra generation. But that gave us a very strong underpinning. That gave us a very, very strong base of our scriptures and our mythology and our tradition. And I think that's really what else is a country. If there is economic development and there is boundaries are melting, and we have a view into the world. If we do not retain our culture, if we do not retain our traditions, what will remain of us? That can stand out. So I think our traditions, our scriptures, our mythology, our history are absolutely priceless, and those need to be retained. So, which is where I felt that when I thought of writing, mythology and history, I realized, what you've asked in this question, that maybe the young reader today does not have that kind of cultural underpinning. But does that absolve us from the responsibility of bringing them back to their hands and to their minds? I think the responsibility is even more. I was reading this beautiful book, if I'm not wrong, a beautiful book by Arun Shourie, where he says that every time there was a decline, when there were moments, or when there were decades of disillusionment or religious confusion, and people didn't know what to follow, somebody came along and somebody brought the entire country back. Whether it was the Buddha himself, whether it was Adi Shankaracharya, whether it was Swami Dayanand and Arya Samaj, there was always somebody who endeavored. And if I may dare include people like Ramanand Sagar and B.R. Chopra into that kind of faith and cultural renaissance, because we can just brush them away and say that they were just filmmakers and TV serial makers, and they were commercial companies. But if we see the contribution that they made to an entire generation, I think they're unforgettable. And in the same manner, I think writers of today, filmmakers of today, have renewed responsibility. And if the modern day reader is not very well versed with history and mythology, it doubles our duty, it doubles our responsibility to take all those stories, all that greatness, all that richness of our culture. And I'm not just talking about the richness of the Hindu culture. We need to take more details, more knowledge about Islam, more the beauty of Sikhism, deeper knowledge about Christianity. All religions need to be taken back to our modern day reader. And I think I did my little bit when I wrote, like I said, the Harappa trilogy, which has a lot of uh, subtle but deep mythological underpinning, with a modern day story, with modern day crime, with organized terrorism, with religious strife, with corporations and multinationals, all of that combined with Indian mythology. And I think that is what made the reading interesting. And I must share with you, and I say this with deepest humility, but I was inundated. I continue to be to receive emails and notes and messages from readers. But when the Harappa trilogy had come out, I was inundated with thousands of mails and messages, and believe you me, hundreds of those were young readers who said Harappa was the first book that they read, and now this book is going to glue them to a habit of book reading. So I think in my own way I tried to contribute, and I urge all authors listening to this podcast, listening to this masterclass, to take it up as a responsibility. It's great joy writing about mythology and history. And also, one very important thing is, let's not take Gen Z to be, sometimes as trivial or as frivolous as we, sometimes we see on social media. I recently read that Gen Z is drinking less alcohol than its previous generation. So let's not undermine the smartness or the intelligence of this generation. Let's also not assume that they know nothing about mythology and history. Let's remember that they've also grown up with parents who are, like I said, the Ramayana and Mahabharata generation. They've grown up with grandparents who would have, in the Indian tradition of वो बोलते हैं ना श्रुति, of storytelling, the Indian tradition of storytelling, I'm sure, is still prevalent in households. So yes, they may not know details of the Mahabharata, about who was Ghatotkacha or who was Barbarik, but they will know who the Pandavas were, who the Kauravas were. They will know who Lord Ram was. They know who Ravan was. They will know a few things already. And I think if we are able to do good storytelling, if we are able to sell books, market our books in a good way, and take history and mythology back into the hands and minds of this generation, I think I will consider it a duty fulfilled. See, this is a question which triggers a lot of emotions in my mind, and I love speaking about this. And very recently, in a few podcasts, I've spoken about this. India has always been a land of storytelling. I just mentioned that my own book, has been acquired by one of the biggest production houses. We have a non-disclosure, so I cannot reveal the name, but it's one of the biggest production houses of India, and we are hoping that big films, two films. The Harappa trilogy is a trilogy, so that it can't be covered in one book. In one movie. So the production house is planning two large films, and like Bahubali, that was also based on beautiful books, I think, by Anand Neelkantan. But I think it's an opportunity lost so far. If you look at the West, some of the biggest hits, some of the biggest success stories are content that has been created for OTT platforms or for cinema, which is based on books. There are some obvious ones, like, of course, George R.R. Martin and Game of Thrones, A Song of Fire and Ice. So those are some of the obvious ones, but very few people know that, if memory serves me correct, even the Hunger Games, the big Jennifer Lawrence success, of 3 movies, 4 movies, the Hunger Games is also based on books. There was just an OTT web series that came. I think it's called The Three Body Problem. That's also based on a book, and I can go on. All the you'll be amazed that about 60-70% of the big hits in the West, they're all based on books. So, I mean, why even Lord of the Rings is based on books? But the tragedy here is that while the Western filmmakers, Western production houses have understood one simple thing: people come to watch movies for the story that they want to see. They come for the star, yes, they come for the special effects, yes, they come for the song and dance, but at the heart of it all, there has to be a story. And there are so many examples where a recent movie, I won't take the name, It involves a very big movie star, but it was on the Air Force and all of that. And I thought that it's going to be a big success. And when I went to watch that movie, I felt so much money spent on special effects, so much money must have been given to the big star, so much on the the other cast, which was also very big, so much on the marketing. Why not on the story? It would have, with the same cast, with the same special effects, with the same investment, if they had invested a little more in the story, that movie would have created history. But it didn't. It bombed, I think. And Western filmmakers have understood, why reinvent the wheel? Why do you want to write a story from scratch when books are available in the market? They're already big hits, which should tell you that the story has been appreciated, by readers. And if there are proven stories available, which books are, it's the surest way to make sure that your movie or your OTT is going to be a big hit. But it's strange, it's very strange, and India is such a vibrant filmmaking market, and I have such a huge amount of respect for the filmmakers in India, for the entire content industry in India. My company Talent Track operates in that ecosystem. We work with filmmakers all the time. But it's a big mystery to me why some of the biggest production houses don't simply rely on successful books. If a book has sold 50,000 copies, 100,000 copies, 500,000 copies, it already shows you that it's a story that is being accepted, that is being loved. And if you are able to adapt it beautifully on the cinema screen, the chances of success are much higher. And now filmmaking and OTT content creation is such a high investment game. It only makes sense for filmmakers to rely on successful books. But it is amazing for me why more books are not being adapted in India. From what I understand, I'm not an insider of the filmmaking process, so please pardon me if this sounds like a generalistic statement. But from what I've heard from my friends in the cinema and the OTT fraternity, if there is 100 is the budget of a show, only one out of that. So if 100 rupees is the budget of, say, an OTT or of an OTT show or a movie, only 1 rupee out of that 100 goes to the writer. So if that is the amount of respect, it's all about commerce. If you're incentivizing somebody so low, it also shows how much respect you have for that craft. There was a time when we recently saw Angry Young Men on TV. There was a time when writers like Salim Javed were the real force in the industry, because at that and that's the time when you got your Sholays and Zanjeers and all those beautiful cinema, because the writers were empowered and filmmakers were really depending on writers and they were trusting writers.